Today I want to make a video that's a little bit different. This one has to do specifically with being different. It's not necessarily going to be something spiritual, but at the same time, those things are, I mean, if you really look at it, they're really inseparable from a discussion on anything else, especially when it comes to someone like myself. But today, I want to talk about my concept of how it's been difficult for me to live in this world, seeing things differently. This probably goes back like as early as I can remember. And to me, I still feel like how I always have. And when I see other people, to me, from my perspective, it almost looks like there was a part of them back in that youth that was a little bit more human. It was like a little bit more like awake in a sense. And then as they went on, it's like you can kind of like see it sort of like just bending until it finally just goes to sleep. And then there's this almost like empty like human there. It's kind of like a play almost from my perspective. It's almost like I'm like, where are you guys? How come you're not there anymore? And then I just end up feeling terrified and alone a lot of the time. I don't know if other people have this experience, but to me, it's like in order to grow up and get about living out in the world, there's almost like a part of your humanity that you have to like murder in order to go past that certain point. And you have to murder it. And you have to start murdering it when you're like a child. You have to, otherwise you won't survive. But to me now, like it just seems like almost like some sick, like twisted kind of language or something like that. I want to use an example that when I think about it now, I think it was Sarah, my guide, talking to me. Because I remember this experience when I was growing up. It was like I was like watching myself get better, like as I went along. Like I had something myself in youth that now feels like after my Kundalini experience, it feels like I've like reawakened that a little bit. Because even I myself had to like kill myself in order to like become an adult. I remember it because I remember it had to do with my eyes. I don't know how to explain this exactly. It was like almost like, again, like a conversation I was having inside my own head, just like I have with Sarah right now. But there was no Sarah from my point of view at that point. It was just sort of like a conversation I was having with myself, but if I think about it, it was exactly the conversations I had with Sarah. Like I remember specifically asking myself when I was like in elementary school, after a certain point, like the question like, you notice, right? It's starting to like go away. There's this incredible like emotional wealth that you have, like this true treasure of a feeling that you have when you're young. That is why you make believe, why you play, act, and make believe, and you really get into it. Part of that never went away with me, but it did kind of like go to sleep a little bit, almost like it was folded over. But with everybody, it's always scary to me because I feel like I'm the only one like alive sometimes, and I'm walking around people who are like empties. They're like zombies in a sense. They're not containing that like humanness that all of us have in our youth. We get kind of like, in a sense, not in a nefarious way, but like we get kind of mind controlled to not be human anymore. And then we stop having like our natural humanity like inside ourselves. And it's a really, really sad thing because I can see people are not feeling the way that I feel. And it has to go back to like what I was saying like about my youth. Like there was something, like I said, at a certain point, it seems like Sarah was saying, like you notice, right? It's so like subtle You don't realize it. Like you just kind of go unconscious, like really smoothly. And then before you know it, it's gone, and you don't even know that there was something that went away. You completely forget. But in that moment, when I was asking myself that question, I remember that it used to feel a lot better. Like when I was younger, before all the training that school puts into you, and I'm just talking about elementary school training, but before all that training comes into you, it's like you're naturally a happier person. You're naturally like this exuberant, loving, healthy, creative human individual. But by the end of that, it's like subtly somewhere along the ways, and I'm not clear exactly when and where it happens, but it kind of just smoothly got removed or got blended out of you. You no longer feel naturally happy like you did when you were growing up. And there's like also this cruelty that comes up like in the hearts and minds of people. There's like this anger, and that is an incredibly good worker in the system. Like that inhuman nastiness to yourself, that criticism, that self-criticism of yourself. And the more human you are, I find too, the more cruel the criticism is that you have to contain with you. It will become like a moral or ethical criticism about yourself that if you don't correspond to the way things are going on in the outside world, you're a bad person. You are evil. You are negative. You are not a good person in this world. And we've been trained to believe it, but it's not actually accurate. It funds more problems than it actually resolves. It's almost like a false fear that people put into people to make them be good. That's actually creating the negativity they're trying to protect people from being. Not that people won't make mistakes or be convinced about things without that fear, but it's a hell of a lot more natural and easy to break apart without that almost military-like drilled fear inside of us to try to keep us under control. And like if you watched my last video about my Kundalini awakening, that nature, that energy, it's not like a controllable thing. It will come about naturally without any kind of mind about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like just raw energy. It's like, imagine almost like a stream, like a very fast running river, starting at the base of your spine and then moving up through your body, right out the top of your head. Personally, I have felt it right here. Especially when you start to fall into your center, it starts to burn those things away, and it starts to melt into the crucible of who you are, removing all the impurities and then sponsoring and supporting the growth of who you are to become like this natural human, which is more like the extension and expansion of the youth that has to be killed in order for you to be an adult. There was like something I was seeing more so when I was young. In everything I did, everything I saw was naturally more like alive, but at a certain point, it's like it became kind of stale. Like you feel this almost like gray kind of like sickness almost. It's almost like you're just being kind of medicated, sort of. Not that I was on medication, I'm just saying the kind of like practices and lifestyles we have, it kind of like flattens you and pushes you out. You know, don't shine your light in the world. Don't be like your own amazing human. Fit in. Don't be abnormal. Be like all of us are. It's almost like what happens when like a disaster or like wartime or something like that. It's like instead of beautiful, lush meals you can have like outside in nature, everyone gets put into bunkers with like rations. The individualism of like what it means to be uniquely your own person kind of gets like pieced out. You can have like this much and don't use that. Not that much, you have to use only this. It's not like the abundance, furtive, natural growth of nature that is just booming with life all over the place. We can become anti-human. We can become almost programmed to be as if we were some kind of machine from a very pitiful, almost mechanical mindset of what life is. And I remember that. I keep thinking about that when I was growing up, that it was almost like she was telling me. She was like telling me, this is going to end. Like, didn't I tell you? You're going to forget. I don't remember a conversation, but it almost seems like there had to have been some point before where she's like, you see how you feel right now? You're gonna lose this one day. And then as I started to lose it, I do remember that conversation that I was having with myself. I brought it up to myself and I was like, see, it's different than it was before. And as the school years went on, it's like I became more and more and more disheartened. There is a lack of that human heart in the authority structures of people who exist. It's like we can't invite that in. We can't be that kind of heartfulness about things. That's how it feels to me. I think in many ways I felt maybe unconsciously like that the system failed me, and so I was just fighting it. I never really lost that feeling of being unhappy with things. I just learned to shut up after a while because nobody could really handle hearing what I had to say. So I just stopped talking about everything and just told people what they wanted to hear. And then when I did, shockingly enough, it was as if I changed like a miracle person in their perspective. It wasn't even like real, it was just telling them what they were pretty much asking me to say, as if the problem was resolved, and it wasn't. So then I would carry this around. I would carry it around for a long time, just never really feeling the same as anybody else. I did go to sleep like what I was being shown around me and what I was seeing around me. But there was also something different between me and other people. I couldn't put my finger on it. When I got my first job, I felt sad working with people. It's like people dress up like incredible amounts of pain, stress, and sadness in their day-to-day lives. They put on smiles, but it all just seems like some really twisted, sick play that people are in, kind of complimenting, good job on lying. Yeah, thank you, I've been lying for so long. Like, it's like this weird, trippy sickness. And I'm just kind of like an observer a lot of the time where I'm like, I'm not gonna say this to anybody. I'm not gonna talk about this stuff at all. Like, I'm not gonna tell people what I really think because it would just come out like as negative. Like, I don't know, what are you supposed to say in a situation like that? It's almost like somewhere along the line, someone did that to them. Someone kind of like smacked them for like being human and expressing like, this is not a good situation, right? I mean, like in certain senses, I would say this is where things like cancer would come from, is like trying to pretend away like the things that are like screaming inside of you for attention. But as long as your inner child is murdered by yourself, no less, then you really have no complaint coming from within you until you have like a Kundalini experience and you recognize, holy shit, like the world's answer to my query, like what am I supposed to do with life, was just this depressing facade about how you need to kind of pretend like everything's okay by doing these things. There's just this lack of like humanness that each of us have naturally as children. It's like just not allowed. It's like you're illegal if you're like human. Like if you really are really human, you're probably in hiding. If you're really human, you probably have a good sense of humor that like would upset a lot of people. If you're really human, you're probably scary to a lot of people where you don't feel fear yourself. You're not scared. They are, and they're projecting onto your lack of injury. Like fear is an injury. It has to be shown to you how to injure yourself so that you can live in fear. But when you're healthy, that fear just falls out and you can't be scared about anything because fear is not natural to our humanity. It's not natural to who we are. Like there has been moments too where just some of my behavior or some of the things I am, it scares people and they don't know how to deal with themselves around me. So they'll project on me. I still feel like that I feel scared a lot of the time living in this world. Or I feel incredibly sad at what I see around me. Humanity is in like really, really bad shape. And a lot of the pieces that look like they're in really good shape are incredibly scary. It's like that kind of feeling that I feel about what seems to be like the high standards that exist in the world. It's like these scary kind of like half humans who have like professionalized their negativity. They've professionalized it to the point of being extremely, extremely sophisticated and polished. Like the idea of an army. Like the idea that an army has incredible stamina, incredible mental discipline, incredible body, physical discipline. They are working in a kind of harmony with each other, but in a state of war. And that's the idea, in a sense, of the antithesis of what it means to naturally be human. It doesn't organize itself like that. There can be a natural organization that occurs, but it's not something that operates through force. That's the idea that exists in the military. It's like a negative organizational structure that is at a very, very, very low density. So it has like a lot of very, very heavily built structures, a lot of usage of physicality in very, very physical ways. It has less to do with allowing. It has more to do with pushing to create a particular outcome at all ends. These are essentially my frustrations, especially things that are coming up right now, just things that I'm thinking about dealing with. But especially this idea of just fear of like being different. That honestly, this world, it's not an accepting place in its principle. Not the world, I mean the people. I have to be clear about that. Like the world, like nature doesn't discriminate, but people do. People can collect themselves in a negative organization. In principle, even myself, we're all very deeply negative. Being different, in many senses, is synonymous to being a crime, when in fact, it isn't. Especially if you are like an indigo, if you are like a crystal or rainbow or golden or just a starseed or lightworker or whatever. If you're one of those like odd ones out, you know, like the black sheep or like the ugly duckling or whatnot, you can be seen to be as if you were just wrong, if you were just like criminal, you're just evil. It isn't so. It's not an aspect of you. It was never your fault. You never did anything wrong. You were what was right in a system that was wrong. It's the bizarre thing, and it makes us look like narcissists to own this. But the truth is that it really isn't you. It is them. It's not your fault. It's their projecting on you that makes it seem like it is. There's nothing inherently wrong with your natural goodness. It's just because it's not agreeing with that professionalized badness, that professionalized negativity that can't see itself. And you haven't been trained, you haven't been given the tools yourself to recognize your own inherent beauty, your own inherent worth, your own inherent structure as being, in fact, positive. You're not evil, you're not negative, you're just different. If you are one of those people like myself, like if you have been projected on, if you even think maybe somewhere deep inside of yourself that you're not a good person because you're different, because something about you is scary, because something about you is so much in disagreement with the way so many of the people in the world are, it's not wrong. It's a beautiful goodness. It's a swan-like goodness. You're more incredible than they would even be able to understand you could be. It's not part of their story. It's not part of their life to really blossom like you are here to really become and blossom yourself. And I think that's been like the hardest thing for me myself, just to recognize that a lot of the times I compare myself and I judge myself and I criticize myself compared to like what seems like successes out in the world, and it isn't really real. It's all like professionalizing yourself at the symbols of what authentically is yours as you own it. You are like the actual worth. There's just symbolically chasing or perfecting onto themselves. They're all just playing a kind of illusionary game where they're just buying the symbols or working hard to create the edifice of what like a real life is really lived just by simply being actually human. I'm gonna say this too, and this is probably my favorite breadcrumb of all time, one of them anyways, is that the most alien thing to humanity is humanity itself. My name is Summer. If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe, leave some feedback if you want. Tell me if you're like a bizarro, weirdo, misfit person like myself. If you're different, you are welcome here. If nobody loves you in this world, I love you. I love you. And you're okay with me. You have one person out there, at least. And that's all you really need. All right. I'll see you soon, guys.